speaker view. So if you put him, like, try putting him on speaker view, and then you can see what it's gonna look like. Like it's just gonna be him.
Also,
Okay.
I'm gonna be spotlighted for the first, or like Fatima's is gonna pin me for the first half, right? And then after, I'll just.
Guys, so I broadcasted it live on YouTube. Can you guys see it? Because for me, oh, it's
Let me
just
check.
redirecting me to the test again.
Let me
Let
check.
me show you. Oh wait, okay. Wait, you see?
Yeah,
Like
we're live.
it's
We're live. We're live. We're live.
yeah, no, I did, but then it's redirecting me to this test part again.
Here, I'll send you the link. You want the link to the YouTube?
Yeah, isn't it supposed to be linked to the YouTube
It
already?
is. It is. It is.
Okay, so it's working.
Yep.
Yeah, we're completely live now, both on
Oh, did I
Facebook
just?
and YouTube.
Okay,
That's fine.
that was
Don't worry.
good. Okay.
I'm gonna add into the YouTube chat, okay? That to ask the question to the career panel.
Sure. Okay. I think we can admit people now, right? Okay.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
فجرا جئت بعد العسر يسرا ربنا أعلاك قدرا يا إمام الأنبياء أنت في الوجدان حي أنت للعينين ضي أنت عند الحوض ري أنت هاد وصفي يا حبيبي يا محمد يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك يرتوي بالحب قلبي حب خير رسل ربي من به أبصرت دربي يا شفيعي يا رسول الله أيها المختار فينا زادنا الحب حنينا جئتنا بالخير دينا يا ختام المرسلين يا حبيبي عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك. أنت نور الله فجرا جئت بعد العسر يسرا ربنا أعلاك قدرا يا إمام الأنبياء أنت في الوجدان حي أنت للعينين ضي أنت عند الحاضرين أنت هاد وصفي يا حبيبي يا محمد يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك. يرتوي بالحب قلبي حبي خير رسل ربي من به أبصرت دربي يا شفيعي يا رسول الله أيها المختار فينا زادنا الحب حنينا جئتنا بالخير دينا يا ختام المرسلين يا حبيبي يا محمد يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك. يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب سلام عليك صلوات الله عليك يا نبي سلام عليك يا رسول سلام عليك يا حبيب
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Fatima, and I will be your host for today's event. I would like to welcome everyone to day one of our careers panel. This weekend, we are blessed to have professionals from various fields join us and share their invaluable experiences. This is an excellent opportunity for us to seek professional growth and learn from those who excel in their respective careers. So we are really fortunate to have our lovely panelists here with us today. As well, they will be also answering any relevant questions that you may have. So feel free to ask them using the chat feature on Zoom or comment section on YouTube and Facebook. Today, we will start off with experts from finance and accounting, followed by medicine, and ending with education. But before that, inshallah, we will begin with a recitation of the Holy Quran by Ali Yahya.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكرى وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلين إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Thank you, Brother Ali, for that wonderful recitation. Now we'll be starting with our finance and accounting professionals. For this career path, we have Muhammad Shahid and Arij Raza. Muhammad is a Ryerson alumni who graduated in 2017 and majored in accounting and finance. He started his career at BDO in the assurance, going down the CPA path, and Muhammad later pivoted into MNP in their assurance practice. He now works at PwC in their management consulting practice, helping with technology implementation and strategy design. As for Reach, she is a fourth-year honors Bachelor's of Commerce student, pursuing a specialization in accounting at McMaster University with the intention of acquiring the CPA designation post-graduation. Areed is kickstarting her professional accounting career with Deloitte in fall 2021 as staff accountant. Ariza's area of focus is the audit and assurance sector. Thank you, both of you, for joining us today. We're incredibly grateful to have you here. Inshallah, we can get straight into it. So, Brother Muhammad, I wanted to ask you, what made you pick this profession?
First of all, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Fatima, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Really appreciate everyone taking time out of their Saturdays to be here to really help promote what we are doing with the youth in the community. So appreciate that. With regards to answering the question, one of the reasons why I was intrigued as to why I picked the profession was because one thing that I realized going through my undergrad was accounting is a versatile skill set, or accounting and finance as a whole is a very versatile skill set, which is required in every industry and in every business. So with that being said, we'll have some panelists this afternoon speaking about law and engineering and, medical science and teachers. And I think the essence of it all is that accounting is beautiful because it ends up touching all of these professions and more. So one thing that I wanted to be able to do was to major in accounting and learn as much as I could about different businesses and different industries and the way different industries regulate. Alhamdulillah, I was pretty lucky to be able to work with companies in the pharmaceutical environment, manufacturing, and tech startups. So it gave me a really good perspective on things and really gave me a good idea of how the overall business world works and how accounting and finance, for whether it's a public company, private company, or even a nonprofit or a masjid, for example, runs. So that was one of the driving factors as to why I decided to major in accounting and finance.
Wow, that's very insightful. Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Sister Areej? What got you into accounting?
Assalamu alaikum. So to answer this question, I initially took a few accounting electives in high school, and instantly when I started taking it, I realized how much I really liked the subject area and how amazing the CPA profession specifically is and how versatile of a career it is. And that's why at a young age, I kind of made it my goal that I wanted to pursue my accounting, my accounting education and inshallah get my CPA designation in the future. So that's when I came into McMaster, and right away I instantly started networking and going to a lot of networking events and trying to build those connections with professionals in the accounting field. And I made sure that I had those connections with me, and throughout my undergrad it helped me a lot because any questions that I had about the accounting field or anything like that, I would go to them and they would answer my questions and everything. And honestly, like speaking with those professionals and building my network professionally, in person and online through LinkedIn, I realized, it solidified my ambition and my goal of wanting to pursue my CPA in the future. So really, and at a young age, I've always wanted to pursue accounting. And then after, educating myself more about the field and how amazing of a career it is, it honestly just made me want to do it even more.
That's very interesting. I'm glad you love your career that much. Just to follow up on that, what do you love most about being in this field? And what would you say is the most challenging aspect of it?
That's a great question. So something that I really love about this field is, for me personally, I was driven by my intrinsic motivation, meaning that I tend to go towards something that fulfills me. And I found that my strengths aligned with the accounting profession beautifully. And, of course, there's a lot of other external factors that play a huge role into your decision of wanting to pursue the CPA. So some of those benefits that come with pursuing your CPA, for example, is that when you have your CPA, it's globally recognized. So that means that you have a high level of prestige and respect attached to that title. And that basically means that anyone that sees you as a CPA, it showcases to them that you are dedicated and ambitious in your profession. And as well, there's a lot of high job security in the CPA world. CPAs are in high demand by employers worldwide, and you can essentially work in any industry that you want, whether it is medicine, in the pharmaceutical, the tech industry, anything of that sort. You can work in any of that. You're not just restricted in working at a general accounting firm. So that was a huge plus. And as well, compensation is a huge factor in people's decisions as well. And somebody that has their CPA, they can earn an average of $1 million more during their lifetime of their career than a non-CPA counterpart. So compensation is a huge thing for a lot of people. So that could, be an aspect of your decision in wanting to pursue it. And as well, when you have your CPA, you can move up the corporate ladder pretty fast. And honestly, there won't be a time in your career where you'll be stagnant, because when you have your CPA, you'll always have opportunities to grow and flourish as, professionally. So that's why I believe, the CPA field is super rewarding. But of course, there are some challenges, with a rewarding career like that. And I think the main challenge is, during the process of getting your CPA, it could be a kind of hard to maintain a work-life balance, because a lot of the times when you start working full time and while you're gaining your practical experience, you have to complete modules in order to write your CPA exam eventually. So that could mean that you're working full time while also balancing school as well. So that could be something to take into a factor. And as well, there are cyclical periods of time when you'll certainly be working overtime. So especially the infamous busy season for accountants, you can work up to 80 hours a week. And it's a quite stressful environment. But of course, this sort of stress can take a toll on your mental health, but which is why it's very, very important you take your mental health first, and you make sure that you have the resources and people surrounding you in order to support your journey of becoming a CPA.
All right, thank you for that. There's definitely a lot of pros and cons. I'm interested to know what you think about this, Brother Muhammad. What would you say are the most rewarding and challenging parts of being in this profession?
Honestly, with everyone on the panel here, I full-heartedly say that Sister Arij touched upon everything. I feel like I would add no value here because, mashallah, she touched upon everything. However, because this is a panel for accounting and finance, and I've worked on both sides, one of the challenges that I think I want to be able to, mention within the profession is the fact that there will be ethical dilemmas that you'll fall into, and this goes with every profession. Tying this back into our Islamic fundamental values and morals that we all have been brought up with, oftentimes we find ourselves at this cross path, right, where we can decide between doing, decision X or decision Y. And oftentimes decision X and Y both challenge your everyday morals or your religion or your deen as a whole. right? And I think one of the things that you want to be able to do is take a step back and realize that, am I compromising my beliefs to pursue something? And so that's just one of the challenges that you can face. And maybe if I was to give a practical example of that, there are organizations that, for example, alcohol companies. Now, if you are in finance and you're a finance portfolio manager, it becomes a little bit more challenging to be able to manage that portfolio if it's multiple different alcohol companies. Likewise, if you're in the world of accounting and you are auditing a company that goes against your morals, that could be challenging as a whole. Overall, I think Sister Reach touched upon the internal journey that individuals who want to pursue accounting will be on, but I think there's also those external factors that you need to make sure that you're continuously assessing to make sure that you're not losing your core values that you walked in with when you did start the profession.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned Islam, because that was going to be my next question. Like, how has being a Muslim affected your professional experience? You mentioned like alcohol companies. Would you have to refuse working for those companies, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think one of the things that you want to be able to do is be transparent, right? And I know in a day and age that we live in, sometimes it becomes a little bit harder to be transparent. You as an individual who's a first-year student or a second-year student, or really just a young professional coming out of university, whatever it may be, sometimes it's hard to be able to speak up and say, hey, this is against my belief, or hey, this is something I'm not comfortable with. But just know that, being transparent and having that open communication with your mentors and your managers is essential for you to set guidelines from day one. I'm here to work hard. I'm not somebody who's going to be lazy. However, alcohol companies or tobacco companies or certain companies that support a certain cause don't align with my personal beliefs, and I'd like if you could just respect that. And oftentimes, if you're transparent and have those conversations early on, management is willing to listen and be very accommodating of that. We had somebody who was, and again, I'd love to be able to give you practical examples. I did work with one sister who was actually from Palestine, and we were auditing a company that was, or the firm was auditing a company that was very pro-Israel. She actually spoke to the partner and said, hey, listen, no disrespect to you or anyone else, but this just goes against my core fundamental beliefs. Can I please be placed on another file? And obviously you go through the whole process of being able to transition off one file to the other, but as long as you do it in a transparent and respectful manner, I can almost guarantee that management is very cooperative and understanding of your situation.
Well, thank you. That's very important and very relevant for all of us. So thank you for sharing that. How about you, Sister Reeds? Do you share a different perspective? I understand that being a woman, I think your experience might differ as well.
Yeah, of course. I found that, being a Muslim woman, through my journey of acquiring my CPA, Islam has played a crucial role in shaping who I am and allowing me to achieve whatever I put my heart into. I found that, keeping my faith strong and my morals and values strong and still doing my due diligence and working hard has led to me to achieve some of my goals. And I found that, having tawakkul in God is very important through your journey, because in the end, it will all work out as long as your intentions are pure and you're doing it for the right reasons and you're always morally sound. And, I found it very empowering to see people balance both the deen and the dunya. As they would say, the opportunities that you get from being a CPA are endless and the world is your oyster. So having the privilege of doing that while also staying on top of your faith is very, very important and rewarding. There is a quote from the Qur'an from Surah Al-Najm, which I actually want to mention, and it says that man will not get anything unless he works hard. So I resonate heavily with this quote because, working hard is something that Islam has always preached about. And anytime I felt like giving up during my journey, I would always remember this quote. And I knew I had to work hard in order to achieve my goals. And, in the CPA world, I don't think that our faith constrains us in any way. If anything, it makes us more unique to employers because we bring our own unique skill set and mindset into the profession.
That's a lovely answer. Thank you. I was also wondering, can you walk us through what the whole university process was like for you and how you secured your position as a staff accountant?
Yeah, of course. So usually with a lot of firms, they end up recruiting during the beginning of your final year. So for me, that was last September of 2020. I did my research during the summer of what firms I wanted to apply to, and Deloitte was my number one choice because it is a firm that I resonate a lot with through my morals and values, and I really admire how they give back to the community, and that's something that I stand firmly on. So I did a lot of research on all the firms I want to apply to, and basically our university, I know all the other universities do the same thing. They have some sort of online portal where you know, the administrators of the business program, they would provide all these job openings of the firms, because, you know, firms are recruiting, they want to recruit university graduates, fresh university graduates, so they tend to work with universities to provide these job openings. So basically how it worked for me is I applied to several places, and basically because it's COVID, all the interviews were through online, and there was several rounds of interviews. And specifically for Deloitte, it was like, you know, video interviews. And then finally in the last round, it was just a one-on-one interview with one of the senior managers. And basically, after that interview, that's when I got like offered the job offer. And I found that there was a lot of support from our school, and a lot of our peers were going through the same sort of pathway. So it wasn't that difficult to, you know, adjust to it and to figure out how I would, you know, apply and everything. And the whole process was pretty seamless. Like there wasn't really any main issues that I came across. So it wasn't too bad.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, and congratulations on securing that job as well. Brother Muhammad, I see that you've got a lot of experience with this. So could you let us know what a typical day is like in your profession?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so to put, I guess, to speak to Sister Reach's point, I went through a similar process when I was exiting school. I exited school back in 2017. So I've got about 4 years of experience now, alhamdulillah, under my belt. I was in the world of accounting and finance for about 4 years. So went through that infamous busy season that, you know, Sister Reach mentioned. But now I work in our strategy group here at PwC. So the strategy group is a little bit different. It's looking at aligning overall core business values and building out a company's overall operational strategy. So a day in the life is a little bit hard to explain just because it's significantly different, but I will give you guys an example, and hopefully, inshallah, that'll put things into perspective. One of the interesting projects that I was working on right before COVID hit was I was actually working with PepsiCo, and we were looking to compete against Powerade and Gatorade. So Gatorade is a product owned by PepsiCo, and we were looking to get into a South American market. So I'm sure you've heard of both drinks. Powerade tends to be a little bit more popular in South America. So Gatorade wanted to see if they were able to get into the South American market. We had to do our industry analysis, industry research, actually go down there, survey sports teams. So it was a lot of initial sprints that we did, a lot of initial, I guess, groundbreaking work that we did to establish what core business strategy Gatorade was looking for. And then we were able to transition that and try to mold that against what Powerade was offering. So all in all, it's a little hard to explain, and I feel like my example wasn't that great, so I apologize. But happy to chat with anyone, you know, offline after this call as well, to give you a little bit more of an idea of what we do with our strategy development and technology implementation. But overall, I think and I think Sister Reach will find this out very soon when she starts at Deloitte, is that no one day looks like the previous, just because in such a fast-paced, technology-driven world, everything is continuously changing. And so because of that, I think it becomes a little bit harder to gauge what your day will look like. And you always get curveballs coming at you. And I'm sure a lot of individuals on this call, a lot of professionals, a lot of young students also have curveballs being thrown at them now in this new COVID environment. So so I hope that answered your question, or did somewhat of a job answering it.
It did, yeah, thank you. That was really helpful. Also, what would you say is the best career advice that you've ever received?
The best career advice for me personally would be really this idea that there's no such thing, and this is something that my first year professor told me when I started university, that there's no such thing as a free meal. Fundamentally, what that meant was you work really hard for, you get what you deserve. The amount of work that you put in is what you'll really get out of anything in life. And, again, to kind of piggyback off, what Sister Reed said, quoting the Quran, or, quoting the Ahlulbayt, or really just quoting any fundamental ideas within Islam, the work that you put in to whatever whatever you intend on achieving, the work that you put in is really what you'll get out. So if you do put in those 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, inshallah, results will follow.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful, not just for accounting or finance, but just for all of us to learn from. Sister Reed, would you mind sharing the best advice that you've received as well?
Of course. To me, the best career advice is to start networking as soon as possible. This doesn't just relate to the accounting field, but in all fields, it's very, very important to really, whether right now you're going into undergrad or you're in the process of doing your undergrad, it's very important to take advantage of every single opportunity that comes your way, especially when it comes to networking, because building that professional network is extremely important. And because right now, because of COVID, since we can't see each other in person, it makes it so our online presence and our online connections becomes even more significant. So it's very important, whether on LinkedIn or on your social media especially, to look into connecting with professionals in the areas that you want to work at, in order for you to gauge what exactly you need to work on yourself, or just getting a glimpse of a person's journey into getting their CPA, or whatever career goals that they've attained. It's very important to maintain connections, because over time you never know which connection could lead you to having a referral, and inshallah one day you could get a job offer from it. So I think it's very important. Also, finding some sort of mentor, somebody that you can consistently go to when you have any sort of questions. I think it's very important as well. And to me as well, I ended up keeping very close contact with a lot of people, and it really did truly help me in my journey of trying to get my CPA.
Thank you, Sister Reed. That's really helpful as well. I just wanted to ask, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, of course. At the end of the day, getting your CPA designation is highly, highly valuable. It's extremely rewarding in every aspect. The opportunities that stem from having your CPA are endless, and the career itself is super versatile, not to mention the amazing travel opportunities, the high job security, the incredible compensation. All those factors come into play, and they really make the CPA profession super attractive, and it's super valuable for a lot of people. And as well, something that I do want to know is that although it's super rewarding, you have to make sure that it is something that you genuinely want to pursue, because it is not a walk in the park to get your CPA. Sometimes you need to have a lot of determination, be able to put in the hard work. But alhamdulillah, if you if you are genuinely, ambitious and you actually do want to achieve it, it's completely doable. There's nothing stopping you, and the world is your oyster. You can achieve whatever you want. And honestly, I really do. I can vouch for, the accounting world, especially. I've had a lot of good experiences throughout my journey, so I would highly vouch for it. And as well, if you have any, further questions or would like to connect with me as well, you can do so at my LinkedIn. I would love to provide any additional support to anyone that's in the same process of trying to get their CPA. And otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say.
Thank you for that. And that's really helpful and kind of you. Thank you. Sorry, Brother Muhammad, is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience as well?
Yeah, I guess just closing comments, as Sister Reach mentioned, networking, making sure that you keep those relationships going strong, no matter what industry you're in, making sure that you're reaching out to senior folks, asking them those really, really tough questions, making sure that you do your homework before going into some of these calls or some of these meetings, and you're asking critical based questions as opposed to asking questions that you could have potentially found on a website. I think it's essential to make sure that you leverage other people's experience, and take their experiences and learn from them to be able to help achieve your own career goals. And especially with mentorship, especially having somebody who is a Muslim within the workplace who's already been there and done that, or has a little bit of exposure over the past couple of years, feel free to reach out to them, reach out to me, reach out to Sister Reach. Use us as this foundational focus pillar, if you might, as somebody who you can ask any or all questions to, right? So, I remember when I started initially, I wanted to be able to find somebody who was Muslim to just ask them, hey, where do you pray during, if you wanted to pray like Zohar, or if you wanted to pray Asr, especially sometimes you're working longer hours. So if you wanted to, pray Maghrib or Isha, where would you go to pray? So being able to find those mentors and being able to ask those questions are essential. So don't be shy. Feel free to reach out to me. Again, you can reach out to me at my LinkedIn. I'm very approachable. I'm happy to give you my number if that you're more comfortable texting me or calling me. But yeah, just make sure that you are establishing those relationships and leveraging them to their max potential.
Thank you. And thank you for offering that as well. That's really kind of you. So thank you both for sharing your insights. We will now be moving on to the question and answer session. Our viewers have asked quite a few questions throughout the event, so we're going to try to get through as much of them as we can. The first question, Sister Reach, I think you can answer this. So how much do grades really matter to employers when you're seeking a full-time job?
That's a great question. So honestly, obviously, grades do play a role when you want to apply to the CPA program after graduation. You need to meet, like a certain minimum requirement. However, grades aren't everything. And, employers really do look for somebody that's, a well-rounded individual, somebody that's had experience, whether it's through internships or your extracurriculars or your volunteer experience, whatever it is, they look for people that are well-rounded and are able to, have some sort of passion in something, and basically grades are not the end all or be all. As long as you meet the minimum requirements and you have, decent grades, that's not going to, stop you from landing a really good job offer compared to somebody that might have amazing grades, but they might not have the experience or, any sort of, whether it's from extracurriculars or anything like that.
All right, thank you. The second question that we have is, Brother Muhammad, I think you can answer this. Can you get your CPA starting with college accounting? Also, what are good companies to work for as an accountant?
Yes, you can. So the very, very quick answer to that is yes, you can. Happy to run through your transcript with you to figure out what courses you need to go through the CPA process. I remember doing it a couple of years ago. Happy to sit down and look at your courses. What are good companies to work for? Obviously, the Big Four have established themselves within the accounting world. They are the top tier in terms of servicing clients. You've also got, mid-sized corporate firms, which I started my career at. So BDO is a mid-sized corporate firm. You've also got M&P, you've got Grant Thornton, and there's that second tier. And again, happy to discuss that a little bit more in depth. And then there are smaller firms. So I guess if your goal is to work in professional services and to provide audit, tax, or advisory services, those would just be some organizations. But again, happy to chat about other ones as well afterwards.
Thank you for that. Sister Areej, there is someone asking more about the CPA process. So could you kind of share your insight about that? How does it work exactly?
Yeah, of course. So usually you need to start off with making sure that you have taken all the CPA prerequisite courses. On the CPA website, they have a list of courses that you should be taking before applying to the actual CPA program. And basically, once you completed those courses in your undergrad, you would apply to the CPA program after graduation. And basically, there are several routes that you can take. The most common route takes 2 years, and that's when you have to, you take the 6 modules one by one over the course of 2 years while you're working full time. And those 6 modules, they basically include the 2 core ones, and they basically cover any subject area, including financial reporting, management reporting, etc. And then you have your 2 effective modules right after, and they sort of delve deeper into 2 of the subject areas. It could be assurance or tax or finance. And then the last 2 are capstone based. So they focus more about the CFE examination and how to succeed in it, the case writing component, etc. Basically, the first route I talked about, it takes 2 years. The 2 other routes, they take only 1 year. It's sort of a fast-tracked way, and basically, it's very beneficial if you want to get it right, get your CPA right away. And basically, what you can do is you can bypass basically 2 of the core modules and 2 of your elective modules. So basically, you would only have to do your capstone when you start working, which is very useful if you are time sensitive.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So this question, I believe it's for Brother Muhammad. You mentioned networking as being a priority, but how is it possible to land a full-time job or internship at a Big Four accounting without using a network, by just applying through the school's portal or through online job postings?
So just to clarify, the question was, can you land a job without networking?
Yeah, so I think the question's just asking how important is networking, because I think both of you mentioned that it's really important, right? But if you're going to be applying for jobs mainly through the online portals, and how does networking play a role in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to answer that question. So yes, networking is quite essential. And say, for example, Sister Fatima, for example, was networking with me, right? She reached out. She said, "Hey, listen, I'd love to pursue my CPA. I'd love to work for PwC. Do you mind providing me with tips?" Over time, I'd help her with the resume. We'd be able to establish a professional relationship. Now, based off of this professional relationship, I'd also, keep in mind that she's looking for a position at PwC. So once the postings would go up, I would be able to internally refer her. Now, being able to internally refer someone obviously puts them in a better spot than someone who's applying without knowing anyone at the organization. Chances are, if I was to refer Sister Fatima, somebody would end up contacting me and saying, "Hey, by the way, what are your thoughts? Does she have the right work ethic? Does she fit into our core values? Does she fit into our culture?" And obviously, I'd have to go out and bat for her and say, "Yeah, she fits the mold, and we'd love to have her on board, and I think she'd be an asset to our team." So that's where networking can be very essential and can really, really help you long term, simply because someone actually goes out to bat for you, as opposed to you blindly applying to a role without having anyone backing you up for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. That's really helpful. Sister Arid, someone's asking, what are some extra credentials that the Big Four companies need to hire someone looking to apply for an internship? Like, what stands out aside from grades or work experience?
Yeah, of course. So if you don't have, like work experience at a general accounting firm, or your grades aren't the absolute best, that's not a problem, because a lot of the four firms, they look for candidates that are well-rounded, meaning you carry yourself diligently and professionally in the workplace. So that means that you have to kind of showcase your strengths and show them that the times that you worked really hard, whether even if it's during your classes, a time that you worked hard in a group project and you showcased some strength, or you overcame a challenge or a conflict with somebody. They really do look for someone, whose personality matches with their work culture as well. And your work experience and all of that during your undergrad, it is important, but as I said, it's not the end all be all. As long as you're involved in your school somehow through extracurriculars and developing your skills portfolio over time, it will truly make a huge impact in your application process and in your interviews as well.
Right, that makes sense. Thank you. Brother Muhammad, I believe this one's for you. So could you expand on the versatility of accounting and finance? How do you climb up the ladder?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. It's a great question. In terms of versatility, I think the skill sets that you do develop with accounting and finance play a strong role in every industry that you service. And so, with that being said, climbing up the ladder comes with developing a certain skill set, understanding and really becoming an expert in that skill set, and then over time being able to again, within the accounting firms, for example, being able to help develop and build those relationships with your clients. Your clients are just as important as anyone else, internally or externally within the firm. I think essentially at the end of the day, our main focus working at a firm, and even with Sister Reach, for example, working at Deloitte, the main focus will always be to serve the clients. So in order for you to climb up the corporate ladder or get promoted, I think what you want to be able to do is service your clients to the best of the ability, understand the skill set that's required to service them at the best of your ability, and lastly, build that relationship with them. Your clients are very, very important, and your clients will also go out to bat for you and say, hey, you've done a great job for us. We'd love to have him around. And oftentimes we've even seen some of our staff get offers from our clients to say, hey, by the way, PwC, you audit Apple, for example. We'd love for person X or Muhammad to come work for us because we've seen his work ethic and we believe that he fits within our culture. So you are under a large microscope, and what you want to be able to do is go out and give it your best. And again, it's very versatile. That hypothetically, if you do decide to go into one of the big four or any of the accounting firms that come out with a certain skill set, it's versatile in the sense that now you can go work for Apple, you can work for Google, you can work for a hospital, you can work for a school. Really, you determine what career path or what industry you'd like to focus in on once you've built that core skill set.
That's really helpful. And it's nice that you mentioned like building relationships with good clients, because our next question is, could you tell us about a time that you had to work with a particularly difficult client, and how did you handle that situation?
Unfortunately, I've got too many stories where you get clients that oftentimes, will be a little bit more frustrating than others. But one of the things that I can tell you, and really this is leveraging off of my previous answer, was that when you are working with some of these clients, and oftentimes when you're a little bit younger coming out of university, you feel like something might be done an inefficient way and you bring it up to a client, they can oftentimes get mad and say, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't need somebody who's 20 years old to tell me how to do it properly. However, I think one of the essential things that you need to remember is that we are there to serve the client, number one. Number two, the internal team that you have with your managers and your senior managers on your end, if you've got a good relationship with them and you've got clear communication with them, my advice would always be to go through them prior to addressing something with the client directly. If you've got a brilliant idea that'll help the client, but they're stubborn or don't want to listen to your idea, I think what you want to be able to do is establish that strong relationship with your own managers and be able to share that idea with them. Once you've got that strong relationship with your managers and they know that they can trust you, then again, they'll be able to use your idea and pitch that back to the client in a way where the client might have a better relationship with your manager than they might have with you. So over time, the client needs to trust you before they take your suggestions at face value. So what you want to be able to do is leverage and use your entire team to get your point across. And sometimes, just being able to say your idea straightforward won't always work. Sometimes you'll actually have to use a median to be able to get your point across.
Right, that's really helpful. How about Sister Arita? I believe this one's for you. Is it possible for someone who is a graduate from a field outside of accounting or finance, who has gained a strong interest in this field, to enter this pathway? And what is there for them to do further for this?
Yeah, of course. I think the CPA pathway is very, it's very flexible. You can sort of do it on your own time, on your own pace. You don't really, if you're coming out of another field of study, you still need to make sure that you are doing the CPA prerequisite courses, and all that information is always available on the CPA website. It's very useful, and you can, you can go to college for that as well. And you don't have to do the full 4 years at a university. You can get your courses done at a college, which is more cheaper, and you can get your required courses, and then you can definitely go into the CPA path. You're not constrained in any way if you come from another background. There's a lot of people that come from, the engineering background or the science background that later pursue CPA. And that's totally doable. You can totally do it. It's not impossible, but you still need to ensure that you are meeting all the prerequisites.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you. Brother Muhammad, someone's asking, does the accounting team spend most of its time working collaboratively or independently?
So this is a little bit of a tougher question, simply because prior to COVID, if you were an auditor or you worked within a tax team, you'd work very collaboratively within a audit room, so just to put that into perspective, oftentimes auditors and tax professionals and even advisory professionals will travel to the client site. So once we travel to the client site, we are physically within their office, and they actually give us one of their office boardrooms to be able to work in. So you are collaboratively working with a larger team. Unfortunately, now due to this virtual environment, it's become significantly harder for individuals to be able to collaborate, but nonetheless not impossible. So what you want to be able to do again is, if you are in that position, working within a collaborative team, again, your team members need to be able to trust you as well, right? So how do they trust you? One thing that you want to be able to do is ask strong factual questions. Another thing that you want to be able to do is make sure that you're meeting deadlines, right? If you need to finish a certain file or a certain section of a file by Friday afternoon, be able to take ownership of that and finish it on time. Your team members will begin to trust you. And slowly your relationship with them will start becoming stronger. And I think with that, they'll come to you to collaborate more often. But yeah, overall, you are working very collaboratively, and you are always more or less working with someone.
Right. Yeah, Corona has definitely changed the way a lot of things work. I believe we might have time for one more question. So, Sister Arit, someone's asking, are there any technical skills that a student interested in accounting should focus on building before applying?
Yeah, of course. So some technical skills that you can work on before applying is sort of your time management skills. Being a CPA, you're working in a high pressure environment where you have to meet deadlines. So you have to ensure that your time management skills are up to par and you're able to manage your time well. And you need to make sure that you're a critical thinker as well. Part of being a CPA is the ability to utilize your professional judgment. And that's something that plays a huge role in your success in being a CPA. So being able to be morally sound and making the right decision for the betterment of the firm, that is very important. So making sure that you know how to use professional judgment, you know how to make the right decision, and as well your communication skills as well, whether it is verbally or on paper as well. It plays a huge role, especially if you're working in the audit and assurance sector. A lot of times you have to write audit reports that could be dozens of pages long, so you need to make sure that you are able to execute your ideas and your thoughts and the solutions in a diligent manner. And yeah, so other than that, if you're a well-rounded individual in everything, there's always room to grow and improve for all of us. Nobody's perfect, so don't let something stop you from applying. Please make sure you're applying regardless, and over time you can build those skill set. Even through your career you can build those skill sets as well.
Right, that makes sense. Thank you once again, Brother Muhammad and Sister Arit, for that enlightening discussion. I'm sure our aspiring accountants learned a lot from that. So thank you for that. Now we're excited to be talking to our doctors next, Dr. Jafar Sayed and Dr. Wayed Mallah. Dr. Sayed is a graduate of the University of Toronto Medical School in 1998 and completed his residency training in internal medicine and cardiology in Toronto, followed by a fellowship in interventional cardiology at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto. And Dr. Mallah is a family doctor currently working as a hospitalist at St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton. She graduated from medical school at the University of Toronto and has an undergraduate degree in cell and molecular biology from U of T as well. So thank you for being with us today. We're really fortunate to have you. Let's get straight to our discussion. So I wanted to ask, what made you pick this profession? Dr. Mallah, sorry.
Do you want my video, or like someone stop my video? But I can talk without video, it's not a problem. So why did I choose medicine? I actually didn't really choose it directly. Initially, I thought I wanted to be I wanted a PhD and become a postdoc and then have my own lab. And then I actually did a lot of wet lab work in my undergraduate degree. And I realized it really wasn't my calling. I enjoyed research, but it wasn't what got me excited about life in the morning. And so I started to explore and look at different avenues. Like, I knew I loved science. I love being around people. I started volunteering at various organizations, and I worked at a palliative care hospital. And I realized then that that's what I wanted to do with my life. So I applied. I made the realization kind of late in my undergraduate degree. I think I was a third year student at the time, and I scrambled to get my application together. And I, alhamdulillah, was successful, and I love it. And I can't see myself doing anything else at this point in my life.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that. I'm glad that you really like your field. So I can't imagine like being a doctor. That's a lot of responsibility, as you can see right now during the pandemic. So what would you say is the most rewarding and the most difficult part about being a doctor?
I think I'll start with the most difficult. Truly, I think the most difficult part is the time. It takes a lot, like to become a doctor takes a lot of time. To specialize, it takes a lot of time. Your work takes up a lot of your time. And that's a lot of sacrifice in terms of, especially, the time that you're going through it is during your like 20s, which is your most reproductive prime. So there is that kind of a pressure, especially if you're a woman, because it's about 12 years of schooling when you complete most of your training, sometimes even more depending on the field that you go into. So I think the time is the hardest part. And then when you're actually working, it's the time away from your family. Although once you're staff, you can have a more flexible schedule, but you're still constantly busy and away. What the most rewarding part is everything, honestly, like I love my patients. I love the problem solving. I love working through issues. In family medicine, it's so rewarding to see patients from beginning to end of their life. You get to meet their families. You get that longitudinal relationship. Before I went into family medicine, I had trained originally as a general surgeon at MAC, but during my residency, decided that wasn't the career path for me. But at that time, it was very satisfying to be in the operating room and to perform operations and see someone being really sick and then fix that. And you can still do that in the job that I'm doing now. So the actual job itself is very rewarding. The relationships you develop with your patients is very rewarding. The thought process, the problem solving, all of that's very rewarding.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So I wanted to ask you just about your journey in general, like how was your overall journey, and if you could go back and do it all over again, is there anything that you would change?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
So my overall journey. So I have no regrets, really. I think one thing I wish I had done more of is explore family medicine more as a medical student. When you go through med school, you in your third or fourth year, I mean, depending on the program that you're in, you start doing clinical rotations. And sometimes your decision for your career can be clouded by the type of rotation that you have. So as a med student, I really didn't have a great experience in family medicine, so I wrote it off right away. But I do wish that I had explored it a bit more, because I think that was truly what my calling was. But I really love surgery, and I had a great time, and they boosted your ego, and I was good at it. And I thought that that's what I wanted to be, but you don't really consider all the parts of it and consider really if that's what you fit in. So I started my residency at McMaster in general surgery, and I did it for 4 years. And there were red flags throughout the entire time where it was like, maybe this isn't what I like. It's not really getting me up out of bed. Yeah, I'm good at it. People want me to stay, but it's not really what I want. But it takes a lot of, I guess, courage to switch your career path so late into the game. I guess if we want to be clear, general surgery is a 5-year program, and I left as a 4th year. So I was basically almost done. Yeah. But I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, because the closer I was to finishing, the more I dreaded it. The more I dreaded the thought of being a staff. And so I had to really reflect and really understand why it was that I became a doctor. I transferred into family medicine, and honestly haven't looked back. It really is where I fit in the most. It's where my personality fits in the most. It's one of the most flexible, versatile specialties ever, and you can do basically whatever you want, tailor your career to be whatever you want. I'm so grateful that I took that step and I switched my career path when I did, because I know that I wouldn't have been happy otherwise.
Right. Well, I'm happy to hear that you're happy in this career path now. We've got a few questions about med school and the whole process. So people are asking if you can still get into med school if your GPA is around 3.5, and just what kind of extracurriculars would you need as a prerequisite to med school?
So GPA wise, I don't know really anymore what they're looking at because I'm quite removed from the process. But when I used to audit applications at U of T, I think GPA, like they also do adjustments too. So if I remember correctly, when I applied to med school, there were GPA calculators, they adjusted them between schools. So it might be like a 3.5 that you have from your school at the time, but when they actually adjust the formula, it might be higher. Generally, to be honest, you need a higher GPA to make the cutoff for interviews, at least in Canada. I can't speak about other countries. And I think what we look for is a well-rounded person. So like, yes, you have to be good at school because med school is hard and being a doctor is hard. So you have to show that you're able to study, you're able to pass tests, you're able to process information, and you're good at school. The other part is they're looking for someone well-rounded. So someone who has extracurriculars. So extracurriculars, really, it's whatever you like. Like if you like sports, then it's sports. If you like music, drama, arts, writing, whatever, just do something that you're passionate about, and that will shine through you in your application. In general, it's good to have research and be part of some sort of research lab, whether it's a wet lab, dry lab, clinical lab, doesn't matter. It looks good. It also is good to have publications if possible, but I mean, not everyone can have that all. Sometimes it comes down to luck, really, whether you get a publication or not. I think volunteering in a hospital or having some sort of experience in medicine where you can talk about in your interview what you've seen about being a doctor, what you've observed, what you've experienced, kind of having a job shadowing opportunity, or at least volunteering in a hospital is good. There is no formula, but these are the kind of things that people kind of look for, and leadership activities, because one of the things that we really harp on or learned in medical school was the CanMeds roles. So it's like manager, advocate, leader, educator, professional, and kind of tailoring your application to fit those competencies is good. So if you go onto the CanMeds website, you can read more about what the competencies are.
Right. Thank you for that. That makes sense. So we had another question. So being a Muslim woman, how would you say that's affected your career, if it has in any way?
I think more than anything, I've affected my career more than being a Muslim person has affected my career, if that makes any sense, in the sense that, you know, we're really targeted in the media and it really does affect your self-esteem. So you view yourself as different. And I think there's that inherent drive to constantly need to prove yourself, which I think if we were not a visible minority, you wouldn't really feel that need. So in a way, it's good and bad because you're constantly pushing yourself. You constantly feel that you need to be proving yourself, but that's also quite exhausting. In terms of, I don't feel that it's limited me. I've had some challenges when I was in surgery in the operating room with wearing the hijab and with the sterile field, and then asking, you know, having it to being asked to have a scrub cap. But I was able to advocate for myself and sort that out where I could maintain my hijab and still be in the operating room. And that was no issue. Sometimes, you know, patients can view you differently. I get asked a lot like, oh, where are you from? And it's like, I'm from Scarborough. I grew up in Scarborough, but really that's not what they're asking, right? And you just have to be very, you have to just be very confident, I think, inherently a bit more confident than your peers, because people will judge you when they look at you, and that's just how people are, and I just don't take it personally. But I don't think it's limited me in any way, shape, or form in terms of where I am in my career. I got into I got into U of T, I got into Mac Gen Surge, and I got into Mac Family Medicine, and now I work at St. Joe's here in Hamilton as a staff. So, and all the while being a visible minority. So I think that you get in your head a lot about it, but most people are tolerant. Your patients will vary and some will be a little bit off-put in the beginning, but people are people, and that's just part of working with people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely sounds like a journey. So medicine is often like glorified in TV shows and just in general. So in what ways would you say that it differs in reality?
I think that people think you get rich as soon as you get into medicine. It's not true. You're in a lot of debt for a long time. So prepare for that mentally. You really don't start your career until at least 13 years after you've started preparing for it. Think of that in terms of glory. Yeah, I mean, there are some times where you feel like amazing because you've done something really great, but then there's also a lot of times where you feel, did I do the right thing, or is my patient mad at me for this? Did I approach this the right way? And I think we're portrayed in a way sometimes as these superheroes. And we don't always feel like that. That's one thing. The other thing is that really nothing you see in a medical drama actually happens in a hospital, and nothing like that happens in real life. Like to get a CAT scan as an outpatient takes at least like 3 weeks, even in the most urgent of cases. So I think what you see in the medical drama is about things happening so quickly and people getting the right help, and this jumping on top of that just really doesn't happen. And that's where you have to really, when you're in medicine, be okay with all the system level issues that are there, and you just try to be a good, effective part of that system. But honestly, being a doctor is really fun. So that part of it is true. There's not as many, fleeting romances that happen as they do in the medical drama. So take that part out of your dreaming if that's something that you're thinking about. You really don't have time for any of that stuff, honestly. But yeah, honestly, I love my job. I don't know. The only misconception is that you are going to be working very hard for a very long time before you actually are able to enjoy your life in terms of financially.
Yeah, definitely. And I think probably because of the pandemic as well, it's great that doctors are being celebrated for the wonderful work that you guys do. So thank you.
I think we need to celebrate all our healthcare workers because
Yeah.
everyone's working very, very hard right now. Very hard. Yeah.
There was also another question. So, do you know anything about nursing students from undergrad getting into medicine? Like, how would that work?
Well, I don't know how that works, but I know it happens because I have some colleagues who actually used to work as ICU nurses, and then they switched into medicine, applied to medical school, got into medical school, and then were my colleagues when I was a general surgery resident. I also have some nursing colleagues who applied to med school and got in, but not in Ontario, like in the US. So if you really want to switch, it's applying just like you'd be applying from undergrad. I don't know actually the specifics, but I've definitely seen it happen. Other things to consider though, if you already have a nursing degree and you really like more the process level problem solving and want more a bit autonomy, is to look at being a nurse practitioner, because a lot of the time, for example, in my family clinic, we have a nurse practitioner and she sees her own patients, and they have prescribing abilities, and a lot of times in rural Canada, and not just rural, okay, like in smaller towns where there's not as many doctors, there's nurse practitioners that service those areas. Even and in the hospital where I work at, for example, we have nurse practitioners who are like wound care experts, or who work with the nephrology team, or who work with the psychiatry team. And again, they have like a physician team that they work with, but really they're quite autonomous and are at, I would say, at the level of a first or second year resident in terms of their independence. So if you don't want to go through the whole shebang of retraining, that's also a career path to consider if you've already completed your nursing training.
For sure, that makes sense. I also wanted to ask, so how difficult is the work-life balance, not just in med school, but even after when you become a doctor? How hard is it to manage that?
It's not easy. And I don't know if it was different. It'd be different if I was a guy. I don't know, but I have 2 kids, and I have a really supportive husband. But despite that, you know, it's hard. Like, I come home and you don't get a break. You have to cook, you have to take care of your kids, help them with their homework. You still have to be responsible for certain parts of the household maintenance. But I think that you have to carve out the time to enjoy your life. So, like, there are weekends I will block and I will not work those weekends, or there are evenings where I will block as well and just say I will not work. So the balance, to actually achieve balance, you have to work for it. You have to plan it. Unfortunately, it doesn't come naturally, and there's always more work to do. So if you let that kind of take over, then there is no balance. So you have to be really conscious of having a work-life balance. And even studying, like, you know, when I was in med school, you're studying nonstop. When you're a resident, you're working nonstop. And you have to really seek out and find that balance. And it's really easy to get all consumed by this career because there's so much information, there's so much knowledge, there's so much need, and you could let it take over your life, but you have to be very conscious of achieving it. And choose, when you are in residency, choose a career path that is able to provide you with that balance more than others. And really important to, when you're exploring what type of doctor you want to become, talk to a lot of doctors in the different fields and ask them that question specifically, because it will vary from specialty to specialty.
Right, that's really insightful. Thank you. So I also wanted to ask you, how can you best prepare for the OSCEs in med school?
The application, you mean?
Yes.
So I think I can't, honestly, it was so long ago, but if I recall, it was like in the summer and then due in September, and then interviews were in the winter. Is that correct? I can't remember. So do the MCAT if you're really thinking about med school. Do the MCAT in the summer of your first year, or the summer of your second year, so that if you need to bump up your score, you have still the summer of your third year to do that. So I would say do the MCAT as early as you can, like within your first year of university, so that if you need to improve your score, you have the luxury of time. Make sure early on in your university career that you are thinking about what you want to do with your summers, because those summers are golden. Those are the summers that you can work in a lab, you can volunteer, you can expand on your extracurriculars, and make really good connections with people who can write you good reference letters. We get, you know, a lot of generic reference letters. You want a reference letter from someone who actually knows you well and can really vouch for you and talk about your qualities, and make that reference letter stand out in comparison to other people. And if you really want to be a doctor, then in university, you have to get good grades. So that I know I just talked about balance, but you have to make that your goal, and you really have to get the grades, and make sure you're doing all the extracurricular activities, and get the grades. Like the first step for med school application is getting through the computer, and the computer has like certain cutoffs. So getting the grades in will be that first step. So if you really want to be a doctor, then in those 4 years of university, you have to kind of prepare yourself for that. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Like in my med school class, there were people that ended up doing their master's or their PhD before they got in, and it's fine. Like really, whatever journey you take, it doesn't matter, because in many of the residency programs now, like having a master's or a PhD is an asset to getting into, depending on the specialty that you want. So whatever journey you end up taking to getting to medicine is fine. If it's meant for you, then it'll all work out in the end. And my best advice is, like, once you have that goal in place, and you work your butt off to get to that goal, because it's quite competitive.
Yeah, definitely. I can't imagine. So I also wanted to ask you, what was your favorite rotation in med school?
Oh, Gen Surg. I love Gen Surg. It was great. Like, there's nothing cooler than like seeing on the CT scan, oh, there's this, perforated appendix, and I'm going to you go to the operating room and you help them take it out, or seeing like a blood clot in one of the limbs, and or like a bleeding vessel, and you have to go and fix that. Like when I was on vascular surgery. Surgery was my favorite, but I also think it was because of the team that I worked with. Like the residents were awesome, the staff were awesome. But surgery is fun. It's fun to be able to diagnose a problem and be able to have the solution for it. And you only spent like 4 weeks in it as a med student, so you didn't really get what it was like to be a surgeon. But in those 4 weeks, it was really cool.
Oh, wow. Okay. That sounds good. I wanted to ask, so can surgery desensitize you to like blood or suffering in that sense?
Yeah,
Because
I don't think it's surgery so much as residency. You're so tired. Like residency in almost any field, I think. You get really tired. You are very sleep deprived. You're constantly working. You're on call all the time. And by on call, it's like 24-hour shifts, and then staying later the next day based on the rotation that you on, what expectations you are. And I think overall that fatigue and stress and trying to meet the expectations of your colleagues and your supervisors, and trying to meet your academic requirements, like doing research projects, etc., you kind of lose yourself. And yeah, you can become quite desensitized and burnt out, but you have to recognize that that's what's happening to you. I think once you stop seeing the patient as a patient and the patient becomes a case, I think that's when you got to kind of pull yourself back and be like, whoa, am I really getting a bit too detached, and why am I getting too detached? And you have to work on that. But yeah, definitely medicine is a very all-consuming career if you let it be, and you have to be really kind of aware of yourself and have a lot of insight into that. And once you start feeling less and less, then I think that's a red flag, and you got to really be careful. But over time you get less. Like the one part that I find has been evolving as my career evolves is I'm not as stressed when there's acuity. So like if someone's having a heart attack, when I was a med student, I would freak out. Now it's like, okay, I know what to do. It's not a big deal. You're still a little bit stressed, but you're not like scared. And I think that, yes, over time, as you become familiar with things, as your confidence increases, as your outcomes, your positive outcomes increase, you become more able to handle the scarier parts of medicine. Yeah.
right, that's definitely a really important thing to keep in mind. Just to add on to that, have you ever encountered a situation where what you have to do kind of contradicts like your beliefs as a Muslim? Like how do you handle D and R cases as a Muslim, for example?
So I think that as a doctor, I cannot impose my beliefs on my patients. So for example, as a family doctor, you have people coming in for example, they want to have an abortion. I myself do not perform the abortion. I myself will not prescribe the medication for it, but I will facilitate the referral to the institution or the doctor who will counsel the patient and will advise them in that setting. And that's my obligation to my patient. That's what I have to do to perform the patient care. For example, there's things like medically assisted dying, which is now legal in Canada. I don't participate in that. If I have a patient who wants to pursue that pathway, I make the referral. And I am obligated to do that by my college, but also that's part of serving your patient. And of course, my beliefs are different than my patient's beliefs, but I can't impose those beliefs on them. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I think that's a really healthy way of looking at it, like keeping that balance between the two. So that's really helpful. I also wanted to ask you, sorry, 1 second. Oh, what is what is the coolest surgery that you've ever done?
Oh, let me think. Okay, so the coolest surgery I ever like helped with, I didn't do it myself. Obviously, I was a med student, was at Mount Sinai. I was working with Dr. Swallow. She's like this amazing surgical oncologist. And there was this giant tumor that was encasing like the person's right kidney, part of their aorta, a chunk of the right side of their large bowel, and a part of their I can't even remember what the other organ was. I don't know if it was the top of the bladder. Anyway, it was like an 18-hour surgery, and we were scrubbing in and out for that surgery to take breaks. My job was not like amazing. I had to retract. I was the med student, but it was the most fantastic thing I've ever worked with. And the cool part is I got to watch the patient after, and they did okay. By the time I left, they were still in hospital. Obviously, it was a huge surgery, but they were recovering.
Wow, that definitely does sound really cool. Well, thank you for this discussion. I'm sure a lot of med students learned something. We'll be taking our audience's questions now. So they've been asking quite a few things, as you can imagine. One of the questions we've got, I think you mentioned scrub caps or sterile fields earlier. So could you please expand on that, how that works with like hijab and stuff?
So in the OR, it's a sterile field. So like when you go, you have to do like a special cleaning procedure before you go in, and you can't have anything that could possibly fall into the patient on. So like no jewelry, they don't allow nail polish, nothing like that. And one of the things that the other surgeons wear is a scrub cap. Well, I have my hijab. And so it was always a problem because you'd be wearing the hijab outside of the operating room and they'd wonder, is it sterile or not? But you also wear your scrubs outside of the operating room as well. And you don't change those before you go into the OR. So what I did is I talked to my program director right away and I said, I wear hijab. I'm not going to take off my hijab to wear the scrub cap because it's a see-through. It shows my hair and that's not in keeping with, my beliefs. And so the compromise we made is I had 10 hijabs that were only for the operating room, and I would wash them separately from all my clothes, and I would keep them in my locker at the hospital. When I got to the hospital, I would change into those hijabs for the day, and just like I would change into my scrubs, and it was the equivalent. And on top of that, I would wear a scrub cap, like the ones provided by the OR, like the mesh ones, or they're the disposable ones on top of it. And of course you have to tuck everything in so it doesn't fall into the patient. But that was what I did, and they were fine with that. I think that the most important thing is they don't want the patient to get an infection from an outside source. And so they were okay with that. But I know some of my colleagues in other places have had trouble. But after you take it up with your program director, they come to a compromise.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like a fair compromise. I'm glad that it works out that way. We've got another question. If you had to change your career from being a doctor to any other career in the healthcare team, what would it be and why?
Oh. I don't know any other career in healthcare or like any career in general. Okay, in healthcare, I guess if I had to change, I don't know, maybe I would become like a social worker. Like it's really nice to be able to help navigate patients through the system and help them set up for discharge or navigate them through programs. Like a lot of the time, especially in family medicine, you have to deal with the whole patient. So this includes like their financial issues, which can affect their health. So being able to navigate through the different application programs, assistance programs, or helping a patient, get a job that will make their income higher and make their situation better. That's what I would do. But if it was outside of medicine, what would I do? I don't know, I'd probably be an astronaut or something. If something like very weird or crazy like that.
No, that sounds really cool. And it's interesting that you mentioned like social work. I feel like being a doctor is such a noble profession. So I can definitely see how it links to that. Someone's asking, what specialty would you recommend a high school student volunteer or to do a co-op in order to see which field in medicine they want to do?
I think pre-COVID, I would say whatever interested you, but I think right now they're being really strict. It would really be whatever interests you. In high school, it's just a matter of figuring out what you like, where you fit in. Even as a university student, I would say whatever field interests you, and you need to have some sort of connection, I think, to get in. Explore that, because all the fields are so variable and different.
All right, that makes sense. So we've got another question. Do doctors work with SLPs or registered dietitians or physical therapists?
Absolutely, we do. In my job as a hospitalist, that's part of my allied health team. And we meet every week and we discuss all the patients and we come up with plans for them. I often defer to their expertise especially for swallowing, to the SLPs, and that can dictate the course of their care. In the community, we don't have SLPs all the time directly, I don't think, but we definitely have dietitians, for example, because in family medicine, you deal with cholesterol, you deal with diabetes, you deal with eating disorders, and having a registered dietitian on your team is really good to have, like counseling, because a big part of treating the whole person is lifestyle modification and counseling on how the lifestyle is affecting their disease process. So yeah, certainly one of the funner parts of medicine is working with a multidisciplinary team to work with the patient as a whole.
Right, yeah, that sounds exciting. We've got another question. What is the most rewarding experience you've had as a physician?
Oh my goodness, there's a lot. I don't know. I think, well, I don't, honestly, there's too many to count. Like the first time I helped deliver a baby was fun. And then the first time I delivered a baby on my own was really rewarding. I recently was involved in palliating one of my patients who was at the end of his life, and he died a very good death, and that was very rewarding. I had a young patient who had really, really bad depression. We worked on some of his addictions issues. We worked on getting his depression treated over a course of like 8 to 9 months. We started to see a difference in his behavior. He's now, working full time, going to school, much more functional than he was before. So it's a lot. I don't know. Like I find a lot of what I do very rewarding. I can't name one in particular. I feel very blessed to be in the career that I'm in. I feel that my job is, it really fills my cup, and I feel very thankful and grateful that I am able to have this career.
Yeah, that does sound really nice. We've also got another question, kind of sadder. What's the saddest experience that you've had, like being a doctor?
I think the hardest one was I had a patient who was quite young, around my age, newlywed, and came in with a breast lump. And this is when I was in surgery, and I saw her in the oncology clinic, and turned out to be a very aggressive metastatic, very aggressive cancer. I took care of her with my supervisor over a several month period. Then I switched rotations, and then on a different rotation, she had come in and she was basically passing away, and she was my age, and it was hard because I had taken care of her for so long, and she had just started, I guess, new journey in her life, and this really had thwarted her path, and she passed away, and that still that stuck with me, and I think that's been one of the harder patients that I've had in my career to date.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. It must be hard, like having someone of that same age, so you kind of relate to them, I guess. We had another question. So how do you deal with the burnout of like being a doctor?
Yeah, I think that first you have to start recognizing, like when I was talking before about getting desensitized, if that's starting to happen, I think that's one of the symptoms of burnout. And I think you really just have to be very insightful, very mindful of yourself and how you're feeling. I think for me, I'm really lucky because I am Muslim, and I can always turn to dua and prayer and reflection, and that time that we pray, you know, 5 times a day, it really is a time for you to reflect and kind of step back and slow down and think and just be still. It's like a form of meditation in many ways. And I think that that's been a very integral part of my like career and life, just having that faith. And then of course with our faith comes our community. So I have really good friends that I can talk to when I'm really starting to feel burnt out. My husband's really wonderful. And I think it's just important to have things in your life outside of your work, regardless of the career that you have, to fill your cup as well.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely important to have that kind of support system, probably especially when you're in this field. So we have someone asking, what do you think is the best undergraduate program to be in if you're planning on going into medicine?
There is no best one. It's the one that you're going to get the best marks in. Like, honestly. So you have to have an undergrad degree in something that you enjoy and in something that you're passionate about and something that you can put the hours in studying for. And that's where you'll get your grades. I know a lot of people talk about the health sci program at Mac, and a lot of the people in that program do end up going on to having to going to med school or doing something in research. But like in my school, in my class at U of T, we had people from very different degrees. We had people with engineering degrees, we had people with arts degrees, we had people with like science degrees, people from the health sci program. So there really is no one program that's like a pre-med program. You have to choose a program that you enjoy and courses that you like. Clearly though, like I know that some schools have prerequisites. I don't know if that's changed. I know like the University of Ottawa had a lot of prerequisite stuff. In general, having some good background in science is good because it'll help you also get like do the MCAT. But there is no one degree in particular that I think is going to guarantee that you get into med school. You need to get good grades, and the only way you're going to get good grades is if you're interested in what you're learning. So I think that's the first and foremost, most important thing.
Right, that makes sense. So we've got someone asking, how has COVID affected your work-life balance?
Oh, it's made it hard because you're working a lot more. There's a lot of like I work in the hospital, so there's a lot of you know, in the beginning there was a lot of fear. Am I going to bring it home to my kids? Am I going to bring it home to my husband? So that was hard, but then you kind of just get desensitized to that. But I think mostly is you're just working a lot more. I cover 6 wards, and we're the ones that kind of are offloading the patients that are semi-stable so that we can make more beds for the acute patients. So it's just been a lot of influx of different patients, a high patient turnover with discharges. So you're just working a lot, but that's okay. Everyone has to do their part right now. It's not normal time. And this is the part that I can do. I also work in the vaccine clinics. I worked in the COVID center. So it's just a lot more work. But that's our part, right? Everyone's doing their part. And this is the part where I've been called to work. So it's been harder to have a work-life balance right now, but hopefully this is temporary. Hopefully we're going to start to see things improve. I don't know. It's hard to predict, but you just got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and it's a pretty big part that you're responsible for, but yeah, definitely. So how do you think COVID has changed the way that medicine is practiced today?
I think virtual medicine is not perfect medicine, right? I know a lot of clinics have moved towards virtual care. It's what we're doing right now to mitigate COVID, but like a big part of a diagnosis is the physical exam, and sometimes we have to forego that to expedite care. So I think that that's been challenging. You have to really really get very good histories from patients and kind of make sometimes decisions on the fly. I think another thing has been I think a lot of patients were scared in the beginning to go see their doctor, scared to go to the hospital. So we're seeing like delayed presentations sometimes of different cancers, of like strokes, heart attacks. But I think that was in the beginning of the pandemic. Now we're starting to see that slow down. But I think that it's just the pandemic itself has just changed society, right? Like, doesn't it feel weird to like be standing more than 6 feet close to someone? Like, I think that's weird now. Seeing people without their mask, like I almost was gonna put on my mask to do this presentation with you guys, which is odd, right? Like your whole perception of what's normal has changed, and that includes medicine. But I'm hopeful that with the vaccine rollout, things will change.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, based on your experience and expertise, how long do you think COVID is going to be present and continuing to affect our lives? No.
I have no, none of us know. I think we're still learning about it. I think the vaccine efficacy is going to be very important. How quickly we can vaccinate people will be important. But I couldn't tell you. I think every day it's changing, and we just have to remain vigilant. Is the way I see it.
Yeah, for sure, and stay optimistic too.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know it's hard. It's not easy, and I feel a lot for university students, because I think online learning is not easy, and I think a big part of university and college and high school in general is the social part. Studying together at the library, being able to go out for a coffee after a lecture, being able to talk to other people about a lecture, and I do feel for you guys. I do. And hopefully things will change soon, but I couldn't predict when. And thank you for doing
yeah, I hope so too. So we've got one more question. What do you think medicine will look like in 10 years, like with the rise of newer technology like AI? So how do you think that would change medicine?
I know that some surgeries are now becoming more robotic, which is enabling us to do surgeries, for example, in like more rural areas through a robot. So we have that program at St. Joe's for urology and some of the bariatric surgeries. I think medicine is ever evolving. There's so much research going into chronic diseases. I mean, when I re-entered family medicine, a lot of what I'd learned in med school had become kind of old. So I had to relearn a lot of the new medications. So I think that 10 years from now, doctors will still be an important part of medicine. I think there'll be more nurse practitioners around, more physician's assistants to kind of divide the work, especially with their aging population. And I think we'll be going towards more combined drugs, especially for like heart disease and diabetes. It's just easier to manage. I'm hoping there'll be more money invested in the care of the elderly, because COVID has really highlighted that it's a huge deficiency in our society right now. So I'm hoping that we'll have either more publicly funded like long-term care facilities or plans in place for people as they age, which will help decrease the burden on our healthcare system, but just like make life better for our elderly patients as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, that wraps up our Q&A session. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much. Okay,
it was really helpful. So yeah, thank you for being with us. We will now move on to the final portion of the panel, which will be education. We are lucky enough to have with us Professor Liaquat Takim, Radia Rashid, and Sarah Mewawala. So Professor Liaquat is the Sharjah Chair in the Global Islam at Master University in Hamilton, Canada. He's a native of Tanzania, and he has spoken at more than 80 academic conferences and authored 100 scholarly works on diverse topics like reformation of the Islamic world, the treatment of women in Islamic law, Islam in America, and more. He teaches a wide range of courses on Islam and offers a course on comparative religions, and is taught at several American and Canadian universities, and is actively engaged in dialogue with different faith communities. Our second panelist, Rabia, is an aspiring teacher and researcher. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in English and History from London at York University, a master's in Islamic studies from Middlesex University, and is currently completing a master's of teaching degree at the University of Toronto's Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. Finally, we have Sarah Mewawala, who graduated with a Bachelor's of Applied Science in Nutrition from Ryerson University. She has also completed a master's degree in teaching from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. There, she was able to publish a condensed thesis on the research conducted on the negative effects of exclusion-based behavior management strategies. Sarah is currently a teacher at a Sadiq Islamic school. She was inspired to pursue work in the field of education through her many years of volunteer teaching, as well as her passion for uplifting learners. So I would like to thank all of you for joining us today for this event. It's truly a pleasure to have you with us. We can dive right into our discussion. I wanted to begin by asking Professor Thakim, what made you pick this profession?
What made me take Islamic studies? Is that the question? Yeah.
Yeah, and what made you become a professor as well?
Well, I was always interested in religion, although I did not always study religion. I knew religion from the madrasa and the classes that we took as youth. But my bachelor's is in economics. Actually, I'm an economist, or at least I was one. But as I said, I was always interested in religion. And about 40 years ago, opportunity came to do a master's degree at the University of Virginia to study Islamic studies. And as I said, I was very interested. I did not know where I would end up, what I would be doing, but I said, the most that will happen is that I'll fail and go back where I was. I was actually in Tanzania, in my home country at that time. So I took up that challenge, and Allah guides in His own ways, and lo and behold, without even me realizing it, paths opened in front of me, opportunities came, and here I am at McMaster University.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. How about you, Sister Radia? How did you get into this field?
Yeah, I think my answer is going to be quite cheesy, but I think for me personally, when it comes to teaching, I really believe that any change that you want to bring in society genuinely starts with education and training the mind, really. And I really believe that starts, I mean, that's any age, whether you're in a university, so you're doing it as a professorship career, or it's as children, high school, that the school and the education and the intellectual world is really the place to start with that. And the younger you are, the better. So yeah, I think that's my perspective on things.
Yeah, no, that's not cheesy at all. It definitely really resonates with me. So I was also wondering, Sister Sarah, what got you into education?
First of all, assalamu alaikum. I think you mentioned earlier when you read out my little bio there that my lots of years of experience with volunteer teaching really sort of gave me the push, right? You also mentioned that I have my undergraduate in nutrition, and when people hear that, they get a little confused. They sort of ask, how did you go from nutrition to teaching? And I say, well, it sort of came to me. Again, I think that's the version of the cheesy answer you were hoping to give. Yeah, so even when I was volunteer teaching, when I was tutoring, when I was working with learners before I became a teacher, I was very happy to see them learn, right? Anytime a student started off not knowing something, and then I got to see that progress, and then have that, their face would light up when they figure something out, that just worked for me. And I felt like I had to be part of that.
Yeah, that sounds really wonderful. Yeah. So I was wondering, Sister Sarah, what would you say is a typical day being a teacher?
Oh boy. I think the answer I give right now is going to be very different from what it would normally have been because of the pandemic, but I think it's still fairly the same. For now, it just differs with that. When I go in the morning, it's like, make sure everything's ready for the day. For my class, we change the schedule on the board. And then we have now that whole process of logging in, because I do hybrid teaching, which means we have in-class learners as well as concurrent, like synchronous online learners as well. So setting up the Zoom as well, getting those guys logged in, making sure that any copies that I've made for worksheets in class or any sort of like physical resources are also digital now and being posted online to Google Classroom. and sort of just rotating throughout the day, and then making sure everyone's safe and healthy at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense. Sister Radia, what would you say a typical day is like for you?
Yeah, so right now in Teachers College, it's mostly just, classes from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. But I just had my practicum experience where I was placed in a classroom with high school students. And for that, I was assigned one class, which was for 3 hours because of virtual school. So they're doing this quadmester thing in TDSB. So it's like they have 2 classes per semester, and then one class is 3 hours, which is quite a lot for students. But in any case, 3 hours of class required basically 3 hours of planning because I was content creating and doing everything basically. So I would wake up in the morning, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Basically, I would be planning, organizing things. And then 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. I would be teaching. And it would be very exhausting to do online because you have to exaggerate a lot of things when you're doing things online. And it's just, it can be very exhausting with like Zoom fatigue. And then 3 p.m. to 4 p.m., I would basically debrief with my associate teacher, like my mentor teacher, basically. I would field any questions students have. I would, like if there were after school activities, clubs, that sort of thing, I would participate in that as well. So yeah, that's basically what it would look like as a practicum experience in a pandemic doing virtual school. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot of work goes into it. Professor Zafim, I was wondering if you could share what a typical day is like for you as being a professor.
You really want to know?
Yeah.
It's actually quite different from from Sarah and sorry, I forgot I missed your name. Radia?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, it's quite different because first of all, the course load is different. My course load is 2 and 1. In other words, in one semester I offer 2 courses. In another semester I offer just 1. And one of those 3 courses, one of them has to be a graduate seminar, which takes quite a bit of time. But a lot of the seminar is actually the students contributing. Of course, there is a lot of prep work involved in it too. But the main, I think the main thing is not the teaching, it's actually research work. As a professor, although I'm not required to do so, alhamdulillah, I've reached a stage where I'm a full professor. So I can basically just go and relax and, sleep on the beach if I want. Not that you want to do that in a pandemic, but it's my passion to be writing and to research and to read. So I ended up doing, in the morning, as I say, I only teach normally it would be twice a week, but now to the pandemic, I have to record the lecture. It's online. One of them is the graduate seminar is an online discussion, but the other one is just maybe an hour, 1.25 hours of lecturing and recording a lecture. But normally I would wake up by 9 o'clock, I'm on my desk and, start reading, writing, researching. I've just finished my 5th book, alhamdulillah. Hopefully it will be published by next year. And I'm starting, I'm starting my 5th book. I've just finished my 4th book. So, and it's my passion to write and to read and to be researching. So I end up normally being on my table till about 10:30 at night.
Wow, that sounds really busy, but it also sounds really amazing.
I don't have to do it, as I said. I choose to do it.
Yeah, that's lovely. Like being that into what your profession is. So I just wanted to follow up with that. What would you say is the most rewarding and the most challenging aspect of being a professor?
The rewarding, I think, is to learn. Because you're always learning until I believe your last breath on this earth. There's always something new that you learn. So the more you read, and the mind also opens up. I find that whenever I read and research, I come across new material, or even if it's the same material, I look at it from a different angle. One of the things that I love about Islam is it is what is very pluralistic. In other words, there's not just one way of looking at things. So it gives you different visions. You have to understand that different people have different understanding. It's not just one vision. It's not just one answer, because we are in social sciences. We're not in physics or chemistry or mathematics, but there's only one answer, the law of gravity, or 1 + 1 is 2. No, that's one part. I think the rewarding part I find, which gives me a lot of satisfaction, is when I'm able to challenge my students to think into progress. I'll give you an example. I was teaching in Denver, Colorado, and we get evals. The students give us evaluations at the end of the semester. And one of the students wrote in my Islam class, says, before I took this class, I was a Wahhabi. Now I've changed my mind. And I said, Alhamdulillah, to make a Wahhabi change his mind is a minor miracle, or a major miracle. And the other thing that gives me a lot of satisfaction is when I see my students excel and become professors or teachers themselves. And I have a few students, Alhamdulillah, who have now actually are teaching in the universities. And that gives me a lot of satisfaction because, let me tell you from an Islamic perspective, okay? When I was young, I went to Qum to study. And of course, I went with a very Western mindset. So I asked my teachers, who I was in what we call Darse Azadi, free classes. They were just teaching me on their own. So I went to give them something to reward them. And they said, what is this? I said, well, it's my token of appreciation. Said, you don't understand. Our way is not money or any gift. If you want to thank us, the best way to thank us is to transmit what you have learned. In other words, knowledge is transmitted. We have learned what we know is from the Masumin, from our Imams and the Prophet. And therefore, your duty, if you want to give back to us, is to whatever we teach you, you teach it to others. You see how it works? So the transmission of knowledge and keeping the heritage and the lessons of the Ahlulbayt alive, I think that's very rewarding in itself.
Yeah, and I love that emphasis on knowledge as well. I think that's definitely something we can all learn from. Sister Radia, I wanted to ask you the same question. What would you say is the most rewarding and challenging aspect for you?
Yeah, I think in terms of the most rewarding, I think it actually resonates with what Dr. Takim said about the most valuable thing being teaching others. I think when it's very rewarding when you see students utilize what you've given them and what you've taught them, even if it's something very, very small. When you see that in practice, it means the world. And especially when it comes to not just the content, not just like 1 + 1 = 2 or memorize this formula, but the actual skills that it took to get there. And like as an English teacher, it's all skills based. So the more you see that in practice, the better. And I think in terms of the most challenging, I think a lot of it comes down to how you relate to the students and how you can sort of breach their walls so that you earn their trust and respect. That can be very challenging, but once you do that, it's also very rewarding, and it really contributes to their learning. So yeah, that's basically what I would say.
Yeah, just being a teacher, it just sounds amazing, to be honest. Yeah. Sister Sarah, I wanted to ask you as well, what would you say is the most rewarding and challenging aspect for you?
So I don't want to repeat what they said, but basically I would echo the same sentiment there, where if you see a student putting something that you taught them into practice, it really makes it feel like it's worth it. Like all that time you spent actually teaching that content, then to see them apply it. Like I've had students email me asking me questions about things I've taught them in math and how they would apply to things in real life, which is good. I think I'll talk about one of the challenges. This challenge is both specific to the circumstances with the pandemic, but also not so much, which is getting in touch with that one student or a few students in your class who just aren't having it. With the pandemic, it's more sort of pronounced because you have those few students who, I see it more with the online learners where they're a little bit, disconnected from what's going on and they're less engaged, and so they're picking up less of what you're teaching them. So as a teacher, you feel like it's like a personal, I don't know, for me, it's like a personal challenge. It's like, okay, we'll manage to get this student on my side and get them engaged and get them learning. And then the reason it becomes challenging is because you let it take away from all your other efforts, right? You let it bring you down. You're like, oh, just because this one student isn't on the same level as me, I've failed. Whereas you'll ignore all the other like 18 students in your class who are doing splendid, or they're learning from you and things like that. And so I think just being able to recenter and reminding yourself that it's not only the failures, like you have to look at the successes. And I think one more thing would be I'm pretty early on into my teaching career, and so I think just setting boundaries in terms of what comes home with you. So first and foremost, things that happened at school that come home with you, right? So things that either frustrated you or, caught you off guard, but also like physical actual work, like how much marking you're bringing home or planning that you're doing outside of your school time, right? So really being able to set boundaries and when you reply to parent emails and those kind of things are challenging.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a lot to take in. So just to follow up on that, what would you say is the best career advice that you've ever received?
Ooh, oh, this is a good one. Okay, so while I was doing one of my practicums, I had a teacher, she asked me, she said, I want you to write down the names of all your students in your class. And I said, okay, well, I'll go grab a class list and I'll write it down. And she goes, no, without looking at the class list, write it down. And I said, okay. And so when you go to write that list, you inevitably forget one or two kids because first of all, it's practicum. And so I've only been with them for 4 weeks. Another thing is because some students will inevitably fly under the radar. Like they'll be like they're either not the, high ranking ones, but they're also not the ones that you want to address, like you're like not on their case so much. They're kind of in the middle. And so they fly under your radar and you don't necessarily feel like you're addressing their needs as much. So she said, when you do that activity, you realize who those kids are, and then you're more mindful of them. So that was one of the best pieces of advice I got.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Never thought about it like that. I'm sure that's really helpful. Sister Radia, what would you say is the best career advice that you've received?
So I would say that for me, I mean, it's something very simple, but I think it means a lot. And it's just the whole notion of be yourself. I think that the reason it means a lot is because teaching is largely a reflection of who you are. And the better person that you are, the more God conscious person you are, the more basically God conscious person you are, the better teacher you'll be, and the better that'll reflect on your students and contribute to their learning at the end of the day. And also the purpose for their learning, which is ultimately to reach God and to reach that greater goal. So yeah, it's just be yourself, be the best person that you can be in front of your students, and model good behavior, good akhlaq, good insight for your students so that they can gain the most out of that.
Yeah, that's a really lovely approach. Yeah, thank you for that. Professor, what would you say is the best career advice that you've received, or what kind of advice would you like to give to future students? I think you're muted, Professor. Sorry.
That is to future students, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like just what kind of advice would you give to anyone aspiring to become a professor, like myself?
To become a professor? I'm reminded of this particular statement that a wise man was asked once, why do you love your teacher more than your parents? And he said, my parents brought me from up there to down here. My teacher took me from down here to up there. In other words, the teacher is not only a muallim, a teacher, but also nourishes the soul, looks after the students outward and inward also. We don't see that much in the secular world in the West, but Islamically we do. And therefore, we do emphasize a lot Islamically, not on what is being taught, but who is teaching. Because the personality of the teacher somehow is ingrained in the students also. If you notice when an Ayatollah gives an ijazah of teaching, permission to teach, two things that he says is this person is learned, and B, he, normally Sahih or Mujtahid Sahih, normally is pious. That is extremely important, especially as Sister Radia mentioned, because the teacher then inculcates or cultivates virtue and goodness in the student. One thing that I would also advise any aspiring teacher is to follow or do what his or her passion is. In other words, enjoy what you are doing, love what you are doing. If you don't, then don't do it. And I talk from personal experience. As I told you, I am a trained economist. And for 1 year, I was doing accounting. Can you believe me? A cost accountant in London, England. And I hated it. I hated it until I got into Islamic study, and I loved it. I would not give this up for anything. But the point is, you only live once, at least Islamically you do. You should enjoy life to the fullest in a halal way, of course. And do what you love to do, enjoy it, because when you are teaching or whatever it is that you do with passion, then that passion does come out. It does show very clearly. And also the other thing that I would emphasize, not just to an aspiring teacher, but to any student, is two things: breadth and depth. Whatever you're doing, know the full field properly, but also you specialize in one field. I do Islamic studies, but I'm a specialist in Shia studies. But also know it thoroughly. As I say in a common lingo, know your stuff and then stuff it well. Do it properly and make sure that you teach it. One of the things that I was told by one of my teachers in Qum says, the way to know whether you have known or mastered a subject is that you should be able to teach it to somebody else without a problem at all. So there you go.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I also wanted to ask, how has being a Muslim, has it impacted your experience as being a professor at all?
Me particularly? You're asking me?
Yeah.
How has being a Muslim impacted my teaching? Is that what the question is?
Yeah, just how has it impacted your experience as a professor?
It has, there's no doubt about it, because when you are teaching something which is very close to you, then you cannot be completely objective. As a teacher, I'm supposed to be objective, kind of, looking at it from the outside, but you can't always do that. I remember when I was studying initially, it was highly problematic for me, because I was looking at things from a scholarly academic point of view, beliefs, our traditions, our rituals, whereas I was trained in the madrasa, where things are very, very simple. So when you learn things and study things objectively, as I was taught to do, then it tears you apart theologically, because what you are brought up to believe in and what the realities out there are not necessarily the same. I don't know whether you understand what I'm trying to say. It may not apply to other fields, but in religion it does. But at the same time, I think being a Muslim has made me more, given me an advantage in that I go into different fields in depth. I'm able to access teachers that a non-Muslim would not be able to. I'm trained in the Hausa also in Qum. A non-Muslim would not normally do that. And I should say also that being a Shia makes a difference to how I teach. Because although as a teacher, I'm supposed to be objective and neutral, and I try to be that. But I do remember once one of my students asked me, says, "Are you Shia or Sunni, professor?" I said, "What was the Prophet, Shia or Sunni?" He said, "The Prophet was a Muslim." I said, "That's what I am." He says, "Yeah, but you teach in a Shia way." It comes out, you can't help it.
Yeah, definitely. But it's nice to see how you can balance between between all of that. Sister Radi, I wanted to ask you as well, has being a Muslim woman impacted your experience in any way?
Yeah, I think for me, when thinking about Muslim identity and how it influences practice and teaching, I think there's two salient things that really stand out. One is the notion of teaching for purpose and because in the secular world, why are students learning? Students are learning to get a good grade and get a good job. Oftentimes it doesn't go deeper than that. But if we're thinking about learning from an Islamic perspective, learning is about reaching that greater goal, becoming a better person so that you can attain something higher. You can reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a good life in the afterlife. And when you're thinking about learning from that perspective, from that greater purpose, learning becomes a lot more enriched and students are able to achieve a lot more. So when you incorporate that philosophy into your practice and you prioritize the purpose of learning rather than what you're learning necessarily, then the learning is a lot more is a lot better, and students gain a lot more. So that's one thing, the notion of purpose. And the second thing for me kind of also relates to that, and that's the whole idea of akhlaq and modeling good behavior for your students. Because again, like part of that purpose of learning is becoming a better person. And where does that come from? It comes from akhlaq. So, you know, the more that you model that good Muslim behavior, the basic good values at any age, you know, it really makes a difference to your students. It contributes to everything they learn about, and it cultivates deeper perspectives that have that both that breadth and that depth. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Thank you for that. Sister Sarah, has it impacted your experience as well?
I don't think as much. When I was doing my practicum, I was mostly working with younger children, and so I think what we expect with like being a visible minority and having to interact in a profession where you're, you know, meeting lots of different people, you would expect some sort of prejudice. But with younger children, that really sort of cancels out because they don't really see the world that way just yet. And then being able to work at a school like a Sadiq Islamic school sort of factors that out as well, because alhamdulillah, I'm blessed to be surrounded by other Muslims as well, other Muslim teachers. So I don't think I have very much experience with that.
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, I see what you mean. So thank you all for sharing your experiences. I think we can move on to our question and answer session now. Our viewers have quite a few things that they wanted to ask you all. So let me just pull this up. Sorry. Professor Takim, we had a few people asking about the books that you've written. So could you please expand on that? What have you written about?
You really want to know the books that I've written on?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, the best thing is actually to go on my website, and I'll put it in the chat, my website, and under a CV or under resume, you can look them up. But very, very briefly, I've written about the heirs of the Prophet. It is the charisma and religious authority in Shia Islam. I've written about Shiism in America. I've written about Shiism in North America. I've just finished writing a manuscript, which I've submitted for publication on Islamic Reformation. And now I'm looking at a Shia tafsir. These are the books. Of course, I've written about 130, 140 odd other articles and, you know, things that are published. Most of them are on my CV. So I'll just put my website on my CV, and then, you know, you can just refer to it anytime you like.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
It's eltakim.com, although I don't know whether it's going to everybody.
Oh, yeah, okay, it's sent to us, and I can just send it to the chat.
Yeah, it's eltakim.com.
Okay, here we go. So we've got another question for our sister Sarah. So someone said that they see that you went into applied science and nutrition from Ryerson, and they're interested in the field of dietetics and in becoming a registered dietitian. So how is the program like? And to become an RD, would you have to do a master's or internship? What did most of your colleagues go into?
A lot of my colleagues from the program, the nutrition program, did go on to have they have sort of a career change just like me. But those that did wanted to go on to follow that RD path, they did have to take an internship, and following the internship, there's an exam that's associated with being certified.
Right. Okay, so we've got another question. I think this is kind of for everyone. Which age groups are more rewarding to teach, and why? So I believe Sister Sarah, Sister Hadia, you can talk. I think this question specifically asks about university students or school-age students. So you can share your experiences about teaching school kids. So what do you think that was like?
Okay, so I've only taught between the grades 1 to 8 spectrum, so I'm still in the primary, junior, intermediate sort of strand. Out of all of those grades, I think the most rewarding one is, well, they all have their perks, right? But so far, I think I'm finding a certain attachment to my current year, which is the grade 8s. Because they're older than what I usually teach, they show a level of thinking that really makes you see your own work, what you've taught them, in a different light, which is nice.
Right, it's nice that like we can learn from others as well. Sister Radia, what's your experience been like teaching kids, school kids?
Yeah, so I've taught like outside of Teachers College, and within Teachers College, I've taught like elementary and a few grades in like the junior intermediate, and then a few grades in high school too. I would say personally my favorite ones to teach would be the 7s. Actually, they're at a really awkward age where, you know, they're kind of just approaching puberty, and they're learning how to push the boundaries a little bit, but they're also still children. So if you can win their hearts, they will give you back a lot. And then I just finished teaching 9s, which was actually a lot of fun. The 10s and 11s can be, I haven't taught grade 12, but I've taught 10 and 11 like in madrasa, and they can be a bit intimidating. So yeah, I think, and then grade 4s are also actually really, they're a lot of fun to teach as well, grade 4s and grade 5s. So I would say maybe 4, 5, 7, and 9. And then for me, primary is fun too, but it's very exhausting. I don't know how you do it, Sarah. Kudos to you, because it's just, there's so much energy that you have to have all the time. Yeah, so for me, it's 4, 5, 7, 9 probably.
Right, yeah, and I can imagine high school students being intimidating. So, yeah, that definitely makes sense. Professor Zakim, would you say teaching university students has been rewarding for you?
Yeah, it's been rewarding for sure. The most favorite students are the ones who give me the best evals. You know, I'm kidding. Actually, I find it very satisfying when I find that the same students take courses again and again with me, because I feel that, you know, he or she is obviously not because they like me personally, but because they enjoy the subject matter, which is very important. Otherwise, I don't really have favorite students or favorite grades. They're all the same to me. I think the higher it gets, the more challenging it gets, because those who are just at the junior level, they're kind of a very fresh. They don't have much experience. They don't know that much. But, you know, at the seniors level, of course, they expect more out of you. And even the jokes dry up sometimes, you know, because you've been teaching them so often. One of the things that I like to do is joke quite a bit in my class. Keeps them awake.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, sometimes students do take courses because of the professor. I know I've done that in university as well. So yeah, I'm sure that you've got a few students taking it because they want to take more courses with you. So inshallah, we can wrap up our question and answer session and conclude our event. Thank you so much for that insightful discussion. It was really helpful. And thank you for answering the questions that were posed by our viewers as well. It was truly a pleasure having all of you join us, and I'm sure our audience took a lot away from today. Tomorrow, we will be featuring 3 other professions: computer science, law, and engineering. So if you're interested in any of those careers, I hope to see you there. Just before we end this event, I wanted to mention that we do have a feedback form in the chat. So if you could take the time to fill it out, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you to everyone for attending, and inshallah, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you for doing this. Very important.
Thank you. No, thank you for being here. I'm sure we all learned a lot.
Welcome.
قدرا يا إمام الأنبياء أنت عينيه ضي، أنت عند الحوض ري، أنت هاد وصفي يا حبيبي